In 1918, the world was entering the final stages of World War I. There was a sense of hope and optimism as the Allied forces took the upper hand. Newspapers provided encouraging reports, boosting public morale, and families looked forward to welcoming home their loved ones. The past 4 years had been hard, but advancing technologies were transforming daily life and new opportunities seemed just around the corner. Similarly, before the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, people were living in a world that was rapidly advancing technologically and socially. Travel and commerce were easier than ever before, and advances in medicine and science were improving life expectancy. Technology was transforming the way people worked, communicated, and entertained themselves, allowing people to connect like never before. In 1918, the world was hit by a pandemic that claimed millions of lives. While people dropped dead in the street, women played a significant role in the fight against the so-called Spanish flu. In 2020, history repeated itself with the outbreak of COVID-19. This time, women once again stepped up and showed incredible bravery, resilience, and leadership during the pandemic. This is Beyond Medicine, a tale of two pandemics. The impact across wider society was significant in both pandemics. In the 1918 pandemic, a highly contagious flu swept through communities, devastating families and leaving countless dead. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic brought the world to a standstill, with entire countries in lockdown and millions affected. The use of personal protective equipment, PPE, was a critical but highly contested component in both pandemics. In 1918, many countries distributed and encouraged the use of masks, but the British government felt they were unnecessary. In 2020, PPE shortages such as masks, gowns and gloves caused a crisis in the NHS. In 1918, essential services were understaffed due to illness and many were unable to work. In 2020, essential workers became the backbone of society, with shortages of staff in healthcare and other critical industries. And this is where our story begins.
Hello, my name is Avril Piutan-Ratan. I was born and raised in Hawthorne Forest, but I trace my roots to the Philippines. So before the pandemic, I'm a care home manager, and then I'm a community leader here in the church, so I'm a church warden. So pre-pandemic, as a care home manager, it was pretty busy anyway. It's 24 hours care. So the residents that I have currently in the home are people with long-term mental health conditions and dementia, and most of them now are on the elderly side. In our church, we support a large number of irregular migrants, people without documents, so people who have been living in this country for 10, 15, 20 years without immigration status. Many of those people, out of fear of being deported or being reported to the Home Office, they haven't registered with GPs. They haven't accessed healthcare, to be quite honest with you. So we knew when the pandemic hit and people needed to get these vaccines, in order to have the vaccine, you needed to have an NHS number. We knew that these people wouldn't have NHS numbers, and in fact, people started coming to the church and asking, how do we get the vaccine? Because we don't have GPs. We're quite lucky here in the church because we are part of Hawthorne Forest Citizens, which is a community organising alliance. So our involvement with the alliance was, we had networks with relationships with Bart's Health. I knew in our community, certainly, there were people that were desperate to take the vaccine because they knew that they were caring for people that were vulnerable. They knew that they were caring for the elderly. They knew they were caring for their employers who had young children. So they were, contacting us to say, how do we get the vaccine? How are we going to be able to have the vaccine? Knowing all of that, but our community connections with Bart's Health, we were able to let Bart's Health know about this community, members in our community that didn't have NHS numbers, didn't have ID. How would they be able to access the vaccine? response, the NHS in response did respond very quickly and said you don't need an NHS number to have the vaccine and you don't need to have your ID shown. So we were able to partner with other community leaders like the Jesuits Refugee Centre in Tower Hamlets, who had pop-up clinics that were giving vaccines to people who were refugees. People with some status, recognised with having, claimed asylum in this country. The assurances that the NHS did say was, we will only take their first and last names, we won't take addresses, you can be assured of that. So it helped alleviate the concerns from people in the community, people that were worried, because the real concern was that the information would be passed to the Home Office and a deportation van would turn up and know where they were and then take them away. So the assurance from NHS at the time was they will only be asked their first and last names. That really did help.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings to everyone. My name is Sarah Begum Mir. So the reason why we started Plate for Your Suffer was because when I was working as an outreach worker, I learnt that through the job that I was doing, that there was a lot of people that needed food. And I couldn't believe that there was homeless people in UK when it's the 5th or 6th richest country in the world, a very developed country, and they still had those issues where people were not getting enough food and there was homelessness. So I was quite shocked with that. So I just wanted to sort of do like a soup kitchen. And when we first started, the food bank is for everyone. It doesn't matter what faith you follow or belief you follow, or where in the world you come from, it's for everyone. So as you saw for yourself, we've got food here from all over the world as well. We do ambient food as well as fresh fruit and vegetables, treats, chocolates. And the reason we set up the system like it is, when people come in, they register and then they get to choose their own food, is because we realised through the pandemic, when the pandemic happened, that people needed to have a choice, because COVID took a lot of things away from some people. And then we thought we wanted to give people the dignity, we want people to choose, so they can choose what they eat and eat what they want. We started Plate for Your Suffer in 2013, so the whole plan was to sit down and eat a meal together and get different communities together, like the elderly, homeless and people in need, so that we can sit, learn about each other, and hopefully with learning about each other it'll help us to eliminate the stereotypical views we have of another.
My name is Sheena Govan. Previous to the pandemic, I work and still work as an actor. I'm a home cook at home, but what inspired me to be involved in the community cook was when the pandemic hit. I'm one of those people that I can't just sit around and not do anything. I always like to get involved and see if I can help in any way. This amazing community cafe was set up by this brilliant woman called Kaz, where we then started doing the cook for lots of different Waltham Forest wards, and I coordinate the High Street ward. When the pandemic was at its height, we were probably servicing and looking after about 20 families, so therefore food is cooked here, and I'm part of the cook team, Tuesday cook team, and then also we deliver it to our families that are near me in Walthamstow. It wasn't means tested. It wasn't anybody in need. If somebody said, I'm in need of food, there was no checking, are you sure? Have you got benefits? So that it was, if you're in need, you're in need. Which I think is the right way to do it, if you like.
Over a century ago, the virus infected an estimated 500 million people worldwide and caused the deaths of between 50 and 100 million people, and was equivalent to 3% of the population. As we look back on this time from our vantage point in the present day, it is easy to forget the scale of the tragedy that unfolded. But through the newspaper articles, letters and correspondence of those who lived through this time, we can gain a glimpse into the lives of those who were affected by this terrible disease, and how once again women stepped up to support those in need. I invite you to join me on this journey through history as we explore the 1918 pandemic through the eyes of those who lived it. The West Ham and South Essex Mail reported on the 19th of November 1918 that
East Ham seems to have got a pretty bad dose of the influenza that in a virulent form has become a scourge throughout the country. It seems to be much more fatal than its previous visitations, and the local authorities are taking whatever steps are possible to minimise the effect on public health. All schools have been closed temporarily, for a week at any rate, and in the interest of public health, they've directed that children under 14 are not admitted to theatres, music halls, cinemas, or public entertainment. The closing of schools was ordered in view of the fact that many of the teachers were away with illness and attendances were down by 50%.
Bernard Wilson of Stepney, who was only 8 years old at the time, recalled,
"As long as I live, I shall never forget seeing people collapsing in the street. There was not an ambulance system as we have today, and I saw people picked up off the ground and taken away in flat-top wheelbarrows."
Doris Martin grew up in Stepney and remembers each member of her family falling ill one by one. She recalled how the community came together in acts of kindness.
Neighbours were afraid to enter the house because of the scourge. When we wanted a loaf of bread, my mother had to put coppers on the outside window ledge. Then a loaf was put there.
Bertrand Coping was a newsagent's son from Islington, North London. Mr. Coping explained how first his father fell victim to influenza and then his mother, and remembers the important role women in particular played.
Relays of strange women came in, simply to sit by my father's bedside. It was just another case where the women spontaneously got themselves organised in the face of a common enemy.
The scale of neighbourly care is hinted at by Dr. Anne Elderly, resident medical officer at the voluntary Hackney dispensary. She noted,
"The difficulty experienced by our patients through lack of sufficient accommodation in their houses and flats in isolating the first cases of influenza which occurred resulted in many cases in the whole family falling victim to it, and it was not uncommon to visit a house in which every inhabitant was in bed, and neighbours had to be relied upon to give any help or assistance they could find time for."
I'd like to tell you the story of Amy. I'll like to call her Amy for the purposes of our discussion. She's a person who's without immigration status. She's been living in this country for 18 years. And it took her 18 hours to come to us. She lives in the furthest north of Scotland. She took a bus and a train to come and have the vaccine at our clinic because she knew she was caring for somebody with dementia who was 98 years old at the time. And she was really, really worried that she could get the virus and, pass it on to him. So I was really moved by the fact that she took those steps to come to us. She trusted us and knew that she could come to us and she'd be trusted to have the vaccine without any repercussions to the Home Office. She didn't know anyone in Scotland. She hadn't been registered with a GP or a clinic. She didn't feel safe. She didn't feel that she could just walk into a clinic in Scotland and ask for the vaccine at that time. She knew that the pop-up clinics that we were running here in Leytonstone with the support of the council and the NHS, she knew that it was a pop-up clinic just with people from our community and others like her. So she felt safe. She felt she could trust us to help her. I just felt incredibly moved by her bravery and her courage to take the vaccine and to take that journey to come here. She was really appreciative of our NHS and the local authority for having cared enough to think about her and people like her, to have offered it to them. at that time. It was fear factor as well. There was a massive, we didn't know if we were going to, would this vaccine continue to work? We just wanted as many people to have the vaccine, and especially people in my community who are looking after really vulnerable people 24 hours a day. They work 6 days a week, they have 1 day off, they come to church here. And because I work in a care home also, right? So there was that added layer of, I guess, guilt on my part that I was working in an environment where I could be susceptible to COVID, and then coming home to my 2 children, young children at the time, and my husband, who's also quite vulnerable, he's diabetic. And, I had to, for the first initial period, I didn't go home. I didn't go home in the care home. We all stayed in the care home, my staff, myself. There was a period of about almost 6 weeks where we literally just stayed in the care home because we've got extra rooms.
I mean, the other things that we saw, and not just at the food bank, is that people could not visit their relatives, the elderly, because of COVID. They couldn't visit them, they couldn't go to the care home, or they couldn't go to the house, mothers living on their own or fathers living on their own. I myself faced the same situation. My parents lived up north, and I lost both my parents through COVID. It was hard, but the blessings in that was because if they had recovered from COVID, because they had ill health before COVID as well, that their health would have deteriorated a lot more. And at that period, when my mum died in June 2020, the ban had slightly lifted in a sense that people could attend funerals, or you could give what we call the ghusl, is the religious bath when somebody passes away. So we were able to take part in that. Obviously we couldn't stay in the house or anything, we had to book a hotel, and then we came back the next day. We were at the food bank. One of my volunteers, he overheard the conversation, because obviously my volunteers were saying, we're sorry for your loss, and we were hugging, and he says, "Did I hear that right?" I said, "What did you hear?" He goes, "You just buried your mum and you're here at the food bank today." I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "I can't believe it." But my faith had made me stronger, and the acceptance that, because we all believe that we are here to die, we live and we die, and we all have to go.
I think what women do, most women, is roll up our sleeves, and we just practically go, right, what is needed here and there, what is needed to be done. Not necessarily, and my husband, I think, will probably disagree, and they don't look long term enough, but it's like what is in the here and now. So I think women are very heroic in that way, because they go, right, this is where we're at. Somebody needs to be fed, somebody needs to be washed, or whatever. Possibly put themselves second for a little bit, which is quite a heroic thing to do. Not necessarily a good thing to do, but I think that's what, I think women are very, fall into that quite easily, to go, let's put myself second, to be able to be looking outward at what is needed. I mean, that's what happened in the war, wasn't it? Was the women rolled their sleeves up, they got on with the jobs, and then when the men came back, they had to then give their jobs back, because the men wanted their jobs back. But equally, what those women had discovered and knew about themselves anyway, that would have been hard. I don't think I'd have coped very well not being able to do that. But
women are absolutely amazing, and they have that. I mean, like here, we all lift crates up and everything. We don't like, oh sorry, I'm going to break my nail or anything like that. Nobody's like this here. Yeah, every day is a celebration for women because of what they can achieve. And to be honest with you, I think even myself as a woman, and I know a lot of the other women can surprise themselves to what they do actually can do. Yeah.
How can we celebrate the roles that women played during the pandemic and beyond? I think highlighting their voices in stories like this, recording them, whether it's oral, visual, just making sure that those moments are captured in some way, so that when we look back at this time, we can look back with a lot of pride. You know, what the pandemic showed us is that despite a lot of the challenges that were around, there's so much hope, and that women provided a lot of that hope for people. I think a way to recognise and honour them would be to have, possibly to extenuate the International Women's Day movement and make it, you know, with a focus on women during that pandemic, because we're still somewhat coming out of that. I think it's still quite raw for a lot of people. So to, you know, really, celebrate it in a positive or dignified way, I think would really, you know, give a lot of inspiration to other women.